A Nuremberg excuse? No, that was you were following orders. Anyway, thank you very much for coming. I'm going to talk about alternative energies in the Third Reich. We look now at the United States and we say, well, gee, wouldn't it have been nice if we had developed solar energy in 1950? Wouldn't we be much better off if we had used windmills and so on to generate power, like here in other places, in 1950? Would we not have been better off if we thought more about coal in 1950? Well, in the Third Reich, the Germans were thinking about that and thinking about it very vigorously. Something I like to put up philosophically, it's been said history doesn't change, only the questions one asks about it change. It's also been said that countries don't start wars, people do, and I think that's definitely true. And as a scientist, I'm taken incredibly by the personalities of the people that were sitting in that dock. 9 of the 24 at the Farben trial had PhDs in organic chemistry, as do I. 9 of the 24 wrote books in organic chemistry that I studied from as a student in the 60s, and which, until about 1990, was central to the development study of American organic chemistry. Who were these guys? So my process of thinking about this is to think about the following, and that is that scientists work at the whims of government. I've been a scientist for 45 years. I've had a couple of grants from industry and a couple of grants from private foundations, but almost all of the money that I've had as a research scientist has come from the National Science Foundation, the National Institute of Health, the Army Office of Research, the Office of Naval Research, the Air Force Office of Research. Am I a pawn of the United States military? Am I a pawn of the United States government? I don't like to think I am, but if you go back and you ask questions of people like James Braddock Conant, who's dead, but who had some very significant things to do with respect to chemical warfare in 1917, or the sons and daughters-in-law of the people that were part and parcel of the development of chemical weapons in 1940 and 1941 and 42, you find out that when total war exists, the rules change. And the people that developed these technologies were just totally involved in the development to save their skin and to save their countries. And we have to think about that in the context of where we sit today in the global economy that has become so significant, as Joan Brown Campbell pointed out Sunday, in American and world technical development. Could it happen here? I've heard that question asked in very distinguished groups at the New York Bar Association this winter by 2 New York appellate judges who asked the question. The first time I heard it, really, in the same context that I've asked it. Could it happen here? I don't know. But it's worth thinking about, and was something that I've tried to bring to the attention of groups like this as I speak. After the war, 1945, we were so angry at the Germans and so angry at the war that Stalin and Churchill and Roosevelt had decided total war, total would blast them all to hell at the end of the war. So they destroyed all these synthetic plants. And this is just a picture of one of the synthetic plants that was destroyed in 1945 on President Truman's orders. These were destroyed. Now, was that a good idea or wasn't it? I mean, right now we're sitting around wondering about where the next fuels are going to come from. I don't know. It was not economic at that time to make, couldn't compete with petroleum at that time, probably couldn't today. But if we had a use for all of those supplies of coals in West Virginia now as a source of liquid as opposed to solid fuels, how different our economy would be and how less dependent we would be on those forces that are causing so much trouble, the Middle East oil company. Now, here's what I like to also sort of look at, and that is, why was the United States different from Germany? And it has a Chautauqua connection. We were sort of hunters and gatherers. This is a picture of Rockefeller, and what Rockefeller did, he gathered oil from all over the place, and he sold it. And his thing was oil, and he wanted to make sure that every product that was sold had some oil in it. So the story is not apocryphal, it's true. The Standard Oil made a deal with Farben so that many of the technologies that had to do with synthetic rubber didn't come to the United States. Why? Because that would mean that coal was the source of synthetic rubber as opposed to oil, and that was not in Rockefeller's best interest. So he delayed research on synthetic rubber through the 30s simply because he wanted to make sure, that he and his company wanted to make sure that petroleum was the source of synthetic oil, not coal. Here's the punchline. Science and scientific corporations, who's in charge? Good government, bad government. How would we have behaved in 1930? How would I have behaved as an organic chemist working in a German chemical company in 1930? Tough question. World War II begat the National Science Foundation, and it was the indemnification, more or less, of a permanent relationship between universities with the government. Its parental patriarch was, I said Hannibal because I was giving a talk in Dartmouth at this time. It was James Bryant Conant. He was the guy responsible for it. And it would have been not, science in America would have been very different if it had not been for NSF. But the fact is that we let a lot of genies out of the bottle during that time. We let them out by a very good design. One of the genies we let out of the bottle was atomic energy. You know, the Manhattan Project took technology that was in the literature, I can show you the original publication, in 1937, 1938 from Hahn and Strassman. And Leo Szilard, who was just one of the most brilliant people who lived during that time, wrote a patent in 1934 that he gave to the British military, created the British Navy, on the development of an atomic bomb. So that stuff in 1930 was available, and it could have been. But what happened was with the Manhattan Project was we made it real. We let the genie out of the bottle. I heard Sam Nunn yesterday talk about, it was almost a carbon copy of the speech that Niels Bohr and J. Robert Oppenheimer gave to Truman in the Oval Office in 1945. And Truman told Robert Patterson, who was the Assistant Secretary of War, to get that crybaby scientist out of his office and never let him back in again. Now with Oppenheimer. Same thing was suggested by Sam Nunn yesterday. I don't know if you heard this, but 50,000, what was the number? 500 tons of uranium have been taken from Russian weapons and used in the United States, downgraded in the United States or around the world for nuclear power. 500 tons of uranium-235. That never would have been gathered had we made control of nuclear armament materials in 1945. Global priority, which is what Bohr and Oppenheimer would suggest. So we live with the mistakes all over the place of our past. We're still trying to get rid of chemical weapons that were synthesized in 1952 to 1955 so that we had a stockpile of nerve gases that we could take advantage of if we needed. Here's Oppenheimer, beautiful book written by Marcus Sherman and Ty Bird, Prometheus, American Prometheus, the biography of J. Robert Oppenheimer. And it's also an excellent PBS program on Oppenheimer as well. Well, that's sort of my story. The story is that the Germans were independent of all the world's supplies of petroleum or rubber and for oil based on the intellectual contributions of their scientific research staffs. That they got involved in things that were well beyond them politically is something that could happen to any of us, I think, although there are arguments about that. And the question is, how do we, as citizens of the United States in this global economy that's developing, maintain our own priorities, maintain our own priorities for the future of humankind in the face of technical developments that are extraordinarily important and extraordinarily significant, and they're what's posed for us dangers for the future. Thank you very much.